Hello everybody, my name is Alex, and today's video I'm going to be showing you guys how to use the VR expansion plugin to set up some basic interaction using levers, buttons, sliders, things of that nature. I actually covered the VR expansion plugin a while back and how to install, so if you're unsure of how to actually go about installing the VR expansion plugin, you can actually go back and refer to that video. But a brief rundown is that you want to create a plugins folder in the root of your Unreal Engine project, and then drop the VR expansion plugin there. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump right into the video. Alright, so I've gone ahead and created a new project. I have done pretty much nothing at this point. So what I've done so far is I've created a default level that we'll be able to work in. And I've also gone to project settings. Since I'm on an index, and that's what I'll be using for this tutorial, I did have to set up grip grab for the grab left and grab right. Other than that, you don't have to do anything else. So I've already gone ahead and created an actors folder. This is where we're going to store all the actors that we're working with for this tutorial, which I guess pretty much goes without saying. So what we're going to want to do is I'm actually going to create a new blueprint class, and we're actually going to look up VR character and go ahead and select that, and we'll call this player. I'm actually going to drop this into the scene real quick, but we are going to need to do some quick editing to this. I want to make sure that's centered, and also make sure that we are automatically possessing this actor. Where's that? There it is. Player 0, and I'll set it up for receive input as well. Okay, so now that that's done, let's go and open up the player. And the player isn't going to need too much setup. For the most part, we have just about everything we need. There is some basic setup I'm going to go through just real quick. First off, we do want something attached to either of our, what are they called, motion controllers? The left grip motion controller. These are actually grip motion controller components. And by default, these don't have any meshes or anything attached to them. So I'm actually going to just go ahead and attach a mesh to either of them. So let's actually go down here. I'm actually going to go all the way down to the bottom. If you actually hit add component, scroll all the way to the bottom, you actually have a section that says VR expansion plugin. So I'm actually going to take a, let's see here. Let's do a, I'm going to do just a regular static mesh. We'll do an optional rep static mesh. And I'm just going to call this one hand left. And let me just go ahead and copy this, and I will attach this one to the right hand. There we go. And I'm just going to set them both to just some cubes, just to keep it simple. I'm actually going to scale these down as well. I found that about 0.2 is pretty reasonable for just some simple cube hands, since the default 1M cube is way too big. Alright, the other thing we're also going to want to grab is, attach, is going to be some collision. This we're actually going to need for some of the interaction. We're not going to need it for all of it. So I'm actually just going to attach a sphere collision to both of them. And actually I want to scale this down just a bit. Let me see this. Let's get a better look at this. Let's scale this down to, I think, 0.55 should be a pretty good size. And again, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. And just use that for the left and right hand. Let me actually go and rename these real quick. Okay. So that's our basic setup for the player. Next thing we're going to want to do is we're actually going to want to jump over here into the event graph. And we actually want to refer back, if we actually go back to our input, we want to go back and we want to grab our grab left and our grab right, so that way we can use those. So grab left, grab right. So at this point we need to, so not all the interaction requires some kind of grabbing system, only some of it really does. So some examples of things that will is, for example, the slider and the lever both need some kind of collision. So we're actually going to be using this to actually set up our grab system. So in order to do this, we'll start with the left hand. and we'll go and do sphere left, and we will get overlapping. We're going to want to get overlapping components. And I'll go into a little bit more about this once we go through generating the buttons and levers and all that. So we can go and do a for each, and this one will be for pressed. Now for this one, we actually want to see if it does implement a specific interface. The interface we're actually looking for is called the VR grip interface. This is actually thrown onto, as far as I'm aware, it's thrown onto a lot of components that are part of the VR expansion plugin for basic interaction. So we can actually use this for some of our interaction. And we're actually going to want to do a branch, okay, which is quite simple. All right, so next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to want to set up our grabbing functionality. And we're actually going to want to do a couple things here. So first off, let's go and grab our left motion controller. And we're going to want to do grip object by interface. There we go. And supposing this is true, this is the point where we actually want to grab whatever component it is we've overlapped and we're going through. So let me actually go and explain this real quick before I go any further. So at this point, we're actually checking to see if we have any overlapping components, and we're checking for components, not actors, because some of the interactions that we're going to be setting up are actually going to be through components and not through the entire actor. So setting it through on the component will just kind of simplify things a little bit. Next thing we're doing is we're checking all of them to see if they implement an interface called VR grip interface, which is pretty self-explanatory so far. At this point, we're actually going to want to grab our object, and we're going, and I'm actually going to split the world offset by just right-clicking and hitting split struct pin, and I'm actually going to set this to world offset is relative. And then last thing we're going to want to do is let's go and do branch. Okay. And we're actually going to set up two variables over here. We're going to call these grab left, and we're also going to create grab right. And these are quite simple, simply just here to store objects for us, so that way we can release them later on, and I will get into that in just one sec. So if we actually hit that little drop down, I'm actually going to create an object reference. It's literally just called object, and I'm going to do that for both. Object, there we go, object reference. Oh, I mean do that. Oh, that's a new thing. I've never done that before. I really wasn't sure what was happening there. I didn't know you could scroll by right-clicking. I wasn't hitting any other buttons. Anyways, let me go and compile that real quick, so that way we can make sure everything's all set up, right? All right, now, not get. We actually want to set our grab left, since we're working with our left hand. And there we go. And we're going to want to set that to our grab left. Okay, and that will quite simply do the grabbing part. Next thing we're going to want to do is we're actually going to want to handle the release. And this is quite simple as well. Since we've already have a reference to what it is we're currently grabbing, we can actually do, let's see here, we're going to need a couple things. We're actually going to need the left motion controller. And what we're going to want to do is drop object by interface. There we go. Released. And then we're just going to pass through our grab left, of course. I'm going to leave everything else the same. We're not adding any sort of velocity or anything like that to our object when we're releasing it. So I'm just going to leave all that the same. So I'm actually going to copy all of this. And rather than do all of that again, I'm just going to paste it down here. We're going to set up our pressed and our released. Let me go and move this over a little bit. Make it look a little bit nicer. There we go. And let's go ahead and replace some of these variables. So here we're going to need to do sphere right. Here we're actually going to want to do grab right. There we go. And we're also going to want to grab our right motion controller and put that into our target. And then I think the only other place is here and, hold on, let me go and grab this. Here and at the end, I believe, are the only other two variables that we need to replace. Yep. And then set grab right. Now, if you want to, you could also check to see if, you know, grab right is valid and all that, or grab left, just to make sure you're not running into warnings or errors or anything like that later on. Since this is just a simple tutorial, I'm not too worried about that for the time being. All right. Next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set up our interaction, or the objects that we'll be able to interact with, our levers, our buttons, our sliders, all that fun stuff. So we're going to start with a button. So let's actually go and do this. I'm actually going to do, for the button you can do just a basic actor. So I'm actually going to do just a actor, call it button. And setup is actually pretty simple. The only thing we need to do is add component, and you want to look up VR button. It should be the only thing that pops up. And I'm just going to leave that labeled VR button. And I'm going to set a mesh on it. Let's set up a cube. Let me scale this down actually a little bit. Let's do like, I want to do a little bit bigger than the hand, so let's do 0.3. There we go. And that is our button. That is really it. Now, I'm not entirely sure on the full functionality of how the VR button was set up. As far as I'm aware, it's essentially just a physics button. So I haven't tried it with objects other than the player, but I know if that you hit any sort of collision from the player onto the button, then it will actually act as a button. So I'll add this into the scene in a sec. The other things we're going to want to create are, let's do another blueprint class. And this, hold on, let's do this. Not that one. Let's do lever next. Alright, so that's our button made. I'm actually going to add all these in at the end and drop them into our scene, so right now I'm just going to leave it as is. Next thing we're going to want to do is do another blueprint class. This one we don't want to do as an actor. This one we want to do as a grippable static mesh actor. And I'm actually going to call this one lever. We'll do the lever first and then we'll do the slider. So if we actually go ahead and drop into lever, you can see we already have a static mesh component at our root. It doesn't really show anything there, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. But I'm not going to bother at all with that for the time being. We're going to do VR lever. I feel like I said that kind of weird. Anyways, let's go and do a cylinder. Actually, let's do the second cylinder that pops up, because that one's upright. And the way that the lever functions is this actually does require you to grab it via the interface, which is what we set up in the player. Let me actually scale this down a little bit too. I'm going to do like 0.2 by 0.2. And the way that this functions is we actually have a center point that it will actually pivot by. And if we want to, we could actually add another component here, so that way we have a, we can see where the origin point is. Now I do want to go into the lever a little bit more, since there is a little bit more functionality that comes, that I think would be more critical for a lot more players. So going over here into the lever, we can actually start over here. This is a lot of the main stuff for the VR lever. You can actually see that we have the option to see like what our rotation axis is, how far we can go in either direction. You can see by default it's only set to go one direction, and it's only set to go by 90 degrees. I'm actually going to go and change that so that way it goes 90 degrees in either direction. You don't have to do this, but it adds a little bit more rotation. Just figured why not. As far as I'm aware, you can go almost all the way to 180. You actually go to like 179.899994. But you could essentially go roughly 180 degrees in either direction. And then this is actually kind of interesting as well. The lever return type when released. So this will actually determine what the lever actually does when you release it. And this is both either by choosing to release it or by moving your hand too far away that it automatically releases. You can see by default it will actually return to 0, but you also have other options like stay, lerp to max if over threshold, and retain momentum. I find that most of these tend to work all right. I'm actually going to leave it at stay just so we're not seeing it go all the way back to 0. So yeah, so there's all that. And then we're also going to, for the last thing, we're actually going to set up a slider. So if we go and do blueprint class, this one's also going to need to be a grippable static mesh actor. Let's go and select that. And we will call this one slider. Go and open that one up. Now again, this one spawns with a static mesh component. You don't have to use this one. I'm not. But I am going to go ahead and do a lookup VR slider and add that component in. And here we actually choose our mesh. I'm going to leave it as a 1M cube, and actually I want to decrease the size a little bit. Let's do 0.3 again. I think that's pretty reasonable. And I actually want to jump down here again just to discuss some of these again. You can see it will let you determine you know, how it slides and on what and in what directions. You're able to lock it, though I don't know why you would ever really want to. You know, you have all sorts of different functionality that you can mess around with. You also have momentum settings if you'd like to add in some momentum as well. So you have quite a bit of functionality again when it comes to the slider. The button, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have as much. You can, you know, you can choose the speed at which it will depress, how far it will depress. So you do have some functionality when it comes to the button. However, I just don't find it to be, you know, there's just not as many options, I think, which isn't a bad thing at all. It's not a bad thing. It's just you have a little bit less to control there. All right, so before we go and test this, I actually want to go and drop all these into the scene. So let's go and start with the button over here. And I will go ahead and move this up just a little bit. Next thing we're going to do is drop in our lever. Ooh, that was weird, dropped it too. There we go. And let's go move that a little bit closer to the player. And I'm also going to drop in the slider. I don't know if I'm going to have enough room to work with this in my play space, so I may have to do some interest. I may have to mess around a little bit in order to get this to work for the demonstration part, but you know, this will work for now. So let me go and run this, and we can go ahead and have a look at this and watch all these in action. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I actually had to reset my position real quick just to make sure that this works. So I'm actually going to go through these left to right. So we're going to go and start with the button. So if I actually... Ooh, at the table. So if I actually go ahead and jump down here, you can actually see when my hand gets close, it actually pushes down to a point, of course. I did want to real quick touch on why it's not actually interacting. So let me actually go and do this. So if we actually hit the tilde key, this is actually a fun little tip. You can actually bring up a little prompt here, and I'm actually going to do show collision. So this actually shows our collision. You can actually see there's a giant red one. This is actually a little bit of a perk to using the VR expansion plugin over the default VR, the BP motion controller, or I'm sorry, the BP pawn in the default VR template, is that this actually has a collision that follows you. It doesn't scale with you, so it just kind of stays there, but it does work with you. Anyways, so if you can actually see, I don't know how well it shows up in recording. I hope it shows up pretty well. There's actually a very light red line that goes around. This is actually the sphere collision that we set up for gripping, if you remember from setting up the player. So this is actually what determines the collision for the button. So let me actually get a little bit closer. I can actually show you. When the collision itself hits is when the button actually starts to go down. So there you go. You can see it does kind of do like a weird little jolt, like almost right there at the beginning. It's very subtle, so it's not too big of a deal, but that's why it's not actually interacting. If you got rid of this collision actually, or if you were just using the collision off the static mesh itself, then it would actually interact based off of the cube itself and not the sphere collision. So there's the button. Alright, so this took a little bit of tweaking around. You can actually see I scaled up the lever. So like I said, I haven't looked too deeply into how the VR expansion plugin works in the background. I just know from like ways I've used it, how it functions. For whatever reason, using the cylinder at 0.2, 0.21 scale wasn't working. It was doing some kind of weird spit, like jumping all around all over the place. I scaled it up and now it's working just fine. So I'm actually not really sure why this happened. I'm assuming that something about the way it functions, maybe the collision left the lever because it was too small or something. I'm not really sure. That's just kind of my best assumption. So if any of you guys happen to know, by the way, why that happened, I actually would like to know. Because it is a very weird issue, and I know that the lever in the VR expansion demo project, the lever's a lot smaller than this, so I don't really know. Like I said, I don't really know why it happened the way it did. There we go. I'm smacking my hand around. Anyway, so that's the lever. Nothing too special to show there. So let me actually go ahead. Let me reposition myself so I can get to the slider. There we go. I think I can reach it now. Come here. There it goes. So that's the way that the lever is currently sliding. It's back and forth in... if I recall, it's set to go in the X direction, so my right hand's gone. So I'm assuming that that's the X direction in terms of the world. But you can see it does slide around a little bit. There we go. Again, nothing too special there or anything like that. It's very basic slider. So yeah, that is all of the button, lever, and slider in functionality. So yeah. Alright, and with that, that is some of the basic interactions using buttons, levers, and sliders in the VR expansion plugin. Like I said, I haven't spent enough time playing around with them to understand them fully in depth. So if any of you guys happen to know about the weird little lever glitching around when it's smaller scale, I actually would be very interested in knowing. Go and leave a comment down below if you happen to know why that's occurring the way it is. It'd be a help to other people too who pass by this video. So yeah, so if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more like this, consider hitting the subscribe button. There should be one right up here. And then there should also be a couple of videos over here for you to check out to help support the channel and all that kind of fun stuff. So with that, that is the end of the video. So see ya.